Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Ginny, president of RAD, and for those of you who are new, let me tell you a little bit about us. We started this book club on Zoom in April of 2020 as a way of creating community in the wake of the COVID lockdown. We hosted our first author the next month. He was a New York Times bestselling author. And since then, have had a few more, but I've never been more excited or honored than I am tonight to introduce our guest author. Although, like David Letterman says, our next guest needs no introduction. In March of 2017, I saw a video of two Texas congressmen driving to Washington, D.C. Beto O'Rourke and Will Hurd, a Democrat and a Republican, were having an excellent bipartisan adventure. Later that month, Beto announced that he would challenge Ted Cruz for the Senate, and the rest is history. I won't go into the whole story, but the title of this book really tells it all. We've got to try. Beto not only writes about many historical present day folks who, against the odds, kept trying to secure and defend the right to vote, but he has and is living it. From running for office to running the largest voter registration organization in Texas history, he keeps trying. Powered by People has over 20,000 volunteers who have registered over 250,000 Texans to vote. Like Beto, they are a force. So without further ado, I want to welcome Beto and thank you so much for coming tonight.
Absolutely. It's my honor to be with you, and thanks for the invitation. I want to be respectful of everyone's experience and everyone's time, and the fact that so many folks, Ginny, first and foremost, among those who are here, are out there doing the work right now and really understand and live this story about trying against really tough odds. And the personal part of this, I think, for me, and I wonder if it's true for you all who are on this call, is that it's nice to say that. It's nice to do this work. It's nice to pat ourselves on the backs afterwards. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that at times we are tempted to give up or to give in, or as I often think about it, to despair, to just say, Jesus, I don't know if this is going to work out. And that's true for all of us. Those of us who run campaigns in Texas, that Senate race in 2017, 2018 that Ginny talked about, the governor's race that we just ran in 22, you finish one of those where you put literally everything that you've got in yourself out there. And you've done that along with thousands of other people who have worked just as hard, knocking on doors, meeting voters, doing everything they can to make sure that their candidate and their cause gets over the line. And you come up short, or you come up really short. And, it begs the question, is this the right thing for you to be doing? And should you be doing something else with your life? And isn't this just the way that things are, for, however many years this has been our Texas, really defined, at least in our government, by the cruelty, the fear and anxiety that are stoked by those in positions of power against those who have no power whatsoever, the gerrymandered districts, the voter suppression, the voter intimidation, the money and the power that those who are in these positions of public trust have and use to keep themselves in power at the expense of those who are trying to make sure that this government and this state moves in the right direction. And, my wife, Amy, and I, many of you know Amy from the campaign or from visiting us here in El Paso. We've had those conversations about whether we're doing the right thing. And, even recently, honestly, at age 51 with a junior and a sophomore in high school and a 13-year-old in 7th grade, we're approaching some transitions in our lives and in the lives of our kids. And just naturally, as we're walking one day, do we want to be in politics? Do we want to stay in Texas? Could we go live somewhere else? I mean, you think about our daughter, Molly, she's growing up in a state as a 15-year-old where her ability to make her own decisions about her body, her future, her healthcare, her life are not respected. And in fact, it's really dangerous and really hard and unnecessarily cruel for women across the state. And frankly, we're privileged, in the O'Rourke household. But what about those families who don't have the resources or the ability to go somewhere else if the situation were to call for it? So anyhow, maybe you all have had those thoughts run through your head as well. But part of how I've been able to answer that question for myself is to think about what all of us have been through together, this fight that we're a part of, this cause that we believe in, the people that we want to help and support and see do better in their lives, to be able to see a doctor or finish their education or work just one job instead of two or three to make ends meet, or to live in a state that respects the right to vote and this inherited democracy 247 years in that so many have fought and died for, and is now ours to either expand or to lose forever. I mean, this is where everything that matters to us for the future of this country, for the future of Texas, is being decided, and we want to be part of it. But I also take inspiration from those who have preceded us. And the character at the center of this book we've got to try is Lawrence Aaron Nixon, who, for those of you who've read it, know was born at the end of the 19th century to a father who himself was born enslaved earlier in that century, grew up in Marshall, Texas, in the northeastern part of our state, a hotbed of white supremacy and ex-Confederate resentment. And nonetheless, this guy flourishes, graduates from Wiley College, goes to and graduates from Harry Medical College in Nashville, Tennessee, comes back to Texas, moves to El Paso of all places, and in 1914 starts the first chapter of the NAACP anywhere in the state of Texas, and he does it here in El Paso. He becomes as civically engaged as a person could be, especially if that person happened to be Black at the time. He votes in every election. He helps craft the bond issues that his fellow citizens will be voting on. And in 1923, 101 years ago, the Texas legislature passes a law that forbids him or anyone who looks like him from voting in our elections. And for those of you who read this, it wasn't done by euphemism. It wasn't, you must pass a literacy test or recite the state constitution. It literally said in black and white, if you're Black, you will not be able to vote in the state of Texas. The next year, in 1924, Nixon nonetheless pays his poll tax, which at the time was a requirement for anyone to be able to vote, takes his poll tax receipt to his normal polling location on Texas Avenue here in El Paso, waits in line patiently, gets to the front of the line, puts his receipt on the table, and the election judge and the poll worker, both of whom recognize Nixon by sight because he's never missed an election. Bless you, Tiffany. They say to Nixon, hey, Dr. Nixon, and I'm sure there was some love in their eyes and some compassion and sympathy that they felt for this guy, but they said, hey, we can't let you vote. And Nixon responds, I know you can't, but I've got to try. And Nixon takes this case to the local district court where he loses it immediately. Think about the setback he must have felt then. He takes it all the way ultimately to the United States Supreme Court and ends up winning this incredible signal victory in 1927 that momentarily integrates elections in the state of Texas until the state legislature is able to meet in emergency session, refashion the laws to circumvent the Supreme Court ruling, and once again outlaw voting by African Americans in Texas. He tries to vote again. Once again, he's turned away. Once again, he takes his case to the local court. Once again, he loses, but appeals all the way to the Supreme Court. And once again, this is 1934, I believe, he wins another important Supreme Court victory. But once again, the Texas legislature meets. The majority, Democrats at the time, by the way, and the governor pass and sign a law that circumvents this next Supreme Court ruling. And once again, Nixon is forced to suffer the indignity of waiting in that line at the polling station at Texas Avenue, getting to the front of it, presenting his polling tax receipt, and being rejected from voting. He is in this struggle for 20 years, from 1924 until 1944, until the Supreme Court finally, in another decision known as Smith versus Allwright, integrates elections in Texas. And this time, there is no recourse for the state legislature to circumvent the precedent set by the court. This is now the law of the land. There will be other ways through Jim Crow in which the state of Texas tries to and successfully prevents African Americans from voting. But this is a huge, huge victory. And not only does it allow Nixon and his wife to walk into that polling station in 1944, and this time wait in line, present their poll tax receipt, and actually vote, but I really think it lays the ground for the first Texas president, LBJ, to sign into law 20 years after that, in 1965, the Voting Rights Act, which for the first time in American history creates a true multiracial democracy. So I think about Nixon and the 20 years that this guy suffered this kind of humiliation, the questioning from his family and his friends, probably the questions that entered his own head, questions that are familiar to us. Am I doing the right thing? Is Texas just going to be Texas? And shouldn't I move to a state where they let me vote, where they treat me as a human being, where I have my full constitutional rights and they are respected? Or should I stay here and fight, knowing not when or really even if he would be successful? That guy stayed and that guy fought. And that guy, with others who helped him, ultimately won. And that victory was important, not just for him and not just for Texas, but it was important for our country because it made the Voting Rights Act in 1965 and really everything that has flowed from that point possible, including the conversation that we're having today. So for those reasons, this guy, Lawrence Nixon, is my all-time hero and is the reminder, for me at least, to get past the dejection, the defeat, the distress, and sometimes the despair, and get back to the fight, knowing not when and really if we are going to be successful in what we do, but knowing that we have to be in this. We have got to try. There are too many people who are counting on us, and not least of whom are our kids and our grandkids, the generations that follow ours, who are counting on us to come through at the right time, and to make sure that we don't come back with excuses that it was just too hard, it was just too expensive, it was just too difficult, it just took us too long. No, we've got to stay in this and we've got to do the right thing. For audiences outside of Texas, I just finished a book tour that took me from North Dakota to Michigan to South Carolina to Tennessee and a bunch of states in between. I really had to help explain not only why this fight is important in Texas, but why I think we're going to win. And this being a presidential election year, I tell them in 2012, when Barack Obama was seeking re-election, he lost the state of Texas by 16 points. In 2016, when Hillary Clinton was running, she lost the state of Texas by 9 points. In 2020, when Joe Biden was running, he lost the state of Texas by 5.5 points. And that trajectory is really a product of everyone who's on this phone call right now. It's not the DNC, because they don't really spend any money in this state. It's not those candidates, and I love them all, by the way, but not a single one of them spent really any time, any money, any effort trying to win Texas. This is a result of the work that we're doing. And really, it helps to explain why Republicans are trying so hard to keep our voters from registering, from voting, from participating in our elections. This is the toughest state in the nation in which to cast a ballot. It's the toughest state in America in which to register to vote. And the work that we're doing in Powered by People, the work that you all are doing in RAD, the work that folks are doing all across this state is an effort to overcome that. We know the playing field is tilted. We know that this is not going to be easy. We know that they're going to pull every trick and stunt, including those that are outside of the law, to try to stop us. They wouldn't be doing this if it weren't so apparent to them, as it should be to us, that ultimately we are going to win. It's just a matter of time and effort. The more effort we put in, the more of us who join this effort, the shorter the amount of time we'll have to wait until we finally get there. So that's my big takeaway from this book, is that we've got to try, that action is the antidote to despair. It is the key to victory. That none of these victories, by the way, are ever going to be final. Even after we win them, we've got to stay in this fight, because the fight will never be over. And as long as we're keeping good company, like those who are on this call right now, like the folks who are out there registering people to vote, who are out there getting in touch with voters, who are supporting these great Democratic candidates that we have right now, then that's a truth that I can take some joy in, and I hope you do as well. So, Ginny, with that, I didn't want to talk too much longer than about 15 minutes, because I wanted to make sure I had a chance to listen to people who were on the call. That was the impetus for writing the book, overcoming my own personal challenges with staying in the fight, finding inspiration from others who have, both past and current, and then just being absolutely up for what's ahead, not knowing how long it's going to take us, but just knowing that we've got to be in this. So thank you all for inviting me to the discussion today, and look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you so much. I know that we were talking before you jumped on, Beto, about how much information about Texas, and many of us are from Texas and have gone through the school system in Texas, that this is Texas history that is not taught to us. So one thing I wonder is, how did you find, I mean, you're in El Paso, but how did you find out about Nixon, right? How did you find out about him? How did you find out that story?
Yeah, it's not easy. And you would think, given everything I just described and the monumental role he's had in American history, that that would be part of the curriculum at elementary or middle or high school in El Paso. And it was not. There is now, thank God, a school named after Dr. Nixon in El Paso, but very belated. But nonetheless, I'm glad that we're starting to catch up. No, but that story was one that was fairly new to me. I knew maybe a little bit about him. I'd heard his name. I knew he was an important civil rights leader. I had no idea how important he was until I really dug in, did the research. Amazingly, got to meet his daughter, who is still alive. I mean, and just think about that. I mean, this is a guy whose father was born enslaved. So we have a woman from El Paso, still alive today, whose grandfather was enslaved. That's how recent this history is, and how alive it is, really. The Great Hanging in Gainesville, for those of you who have not read this book or that chapter, the largest, or one of the largest, mass hangings in U.S. history took place in Cook County in Gainesville, Texas, at the beginning of the Civil War. And those who were hanged were all white men, believed to be Union sympathizers, in a county which should make you proud if you're from Cook County, voted against seceding from the Union. I mean, I know that there were a lot of people in Texas at the time who wanted to secede, who wanted to protect the institution of slavery, but there were many others who did not. I mean, Sam Houston, most famously of them, but the people of Cook County, and many of them literally paid with their lives. There is no memorial to those who were hanged in Cook County, but there is a memorial to the Confederate States of America. And I find the irony absolutely galling that this county that voted not to join the Confederacy has not one, but two prominent Confederate statues up, one of them right in front of the county courthouse, like a lot of county courthouses in Texas. But the other one, and this is a story that's in the book, was brought down by young activists who were able to appeal to their fellow citizens and to elected leaders who may not agree with them on everything, but agreed that maybe this was too much. And so one of those statues is down, one to go. But whether it's Gainesville or Nixon or some of these other stories, like the elevation of Mexican-American leadership in Cotulla, Texas, thanks in part to Lyndon Baines Johnson and his time teaching school there at the Wellhausen School. These are things that I really discovered traveling Texas, listening to people that I've met along the way, going back to 2017 up through to today, and then just doing some research and kind of digging in.
Thank you. Who has a question? Come on, y'all. I know you have questions.
I have a question. Some of my coworkers are very young, in their 20s. They are not college educated. I recently asked them if they would like to register to vote, and one young man immediately said yes. Of course, he's Hispanic, and I said, "Are you a citizen?" He goes, "I don't know. How would I know?" I said, "Well, were you born here?" We got him registered. The other young lady said to me, "I'm not political. I wouldn't know how to vote. Why would I do that?" Now, this young lady has 2 young daughters. And I immediately said, "Because of your children." But for her, it's not personal. And I didn't know what to say to make it personal for her. Can you give me some guidance?
Sorry, I'm just trying to let this ambulance pass.
Oh,
That's the cost of alfresco Zoom. I've been spending my days under Kate Roberts' leadership. She's on the call, one of our Powered by People organizers on the UTEP campus, having exactly these conversations with young people. I'm out there with the UTEP College Dems and with Powered by People. And I'm just like, on the main walk saying, "Hey, would you like to get registered to vote?" Somebody comes over and we have these kind of conversations. And, sometimes I feel compelled to try to convince somebody, but I bet you found this too. When I'm just listening to them, what's important to you? What's going on in your life? And, different issues will come up. I don't have health insurance, or having a hard time finding a job, or the job I have doesn't pay enough. Or I'm taking on all this student loan debt, and I'm not sure how I'm going to pay this off, or I'm worried about gun violence or climate change. I mean, people will really open up if you'll just listen. There's always a way to connect what they care about with this next election, and specifically with candidates that we support. Imagine what Colin Allred could do in the Senate, or Joe Biden in another term, or local elections that matter to what we're doing here in El Paso. So I've found that to be very successful. And young people who are on the fence very often will then say, "You know what? Okay, I'll get registered." And in our organization, Powered by People, we then take another step. And after they get registered, we say, "Hey, could I stay in touch with you?" And not from Powered by People, not from the Democratic Party, not from the Colin Allred campaign. Could I just personally stay in touch with you? And all of our volunteers are doing that with the people they're registering, helping them not only make sure they know how to vote, where to vote, and when election day is, but there to answer questions, and maybe just to remind them of what's on the ballot and why it's so important to vote. And then here's something else, just kind of referring back to history again. When I think about the major turning points in this country's story, invariably young people were in the vanguard. It doesn't mean that those of us who are older didn't have a role as well, but the age of those who won our independence from the British Empire, the age of those by the hundreds of thousands who gave their lives to reunify this country in the Civil War and to abolish the institution of slavery, those who were sent often against their will to fight in Vietnam, or those who volunteered and landed on the beaches in Normandy on D-Day. They're 17, they're 18, they're 19 years old. The people who gave their lives in the civil rights and the voting rights marches. John Lewis almost beaten to death at the age of 24. I just say all that to say that I feel like young people get it. They very often are the ones to sacrifice the most. But I think they also have some legitimate questions about whether this system of government works and whether voting matters. And I think listening to them and being intellectually honest about some of the challenges that we have is important as well. And then, I think including them in what we do, asking them to volunteer for us, hiring them on these campaigns, following the lead that they set on the issues that they care most about. I think all of that is part of it. And then last thing, I think that, or I know that Abbott and Paxton and Patrick, they all see the threat that these young people pose. They are removing polling locations from college campuses. You know, Texas A&M, where they were always happy to have a polling place there because they just thought it was so conservative and red. But we started to win on Texas A&M, and they removed the Texas A&M polling place this last election. They've been screwing with the kids at Prairie View A&M, a historically black college, for as long as Prairie View A&M has been in existence. So they know that threat, and we should know that power. And I think really do what we can to bring those young people onto the rolls and then show them the respect I think that they deserve by listening to them and including them as much as we can. And putting a plug in for Powered by People, if you want to join us in this work of being on college campuses, registering, staying in touch with young people, we'd love to have you. And I know that Kate just put a link up in the chat. But anyhow, great question. Thank you for asking it.
We actually have somebody on the call that's been working with Powered by People for since 2019. Rocio is in Burleson and has been with you, I guess, on your campaigns and stuff too. So it was nice meeting her earlier too, and to know that she's been there since the start, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Vita Call has a question. Ask to unmute. Can't hear you yet, Vita. Can't hear you.
No.
Can't hear you, Vita. You want to write your question in, and and one of us can ask it. And I'll go on to Tiffany.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody at RAD, and Beto, thank you so much for inspiring us again here. I put some notes in the chat about the screening of an Army of Women that's going to be showing in Dallas. And Beto, I reached out to you and your team about that too. Just so everybody knows, it's about some rape survivors in Austin who were failed by the city of Austin, and they sued and won a class action lawsuit. The attorneys suing on that are also suing on the abortion ban, so I kind of encourage everybody to check it out. What I was going to ask about here too, though, was I have friends who around the country have supported you, Beto, over the years and are still kind of like looking for ways to support from other areas. And I had kind of told you before, my friend's girlfriend is the Harry Styles tour director. So I still kind of reach out to them periodically if there's other ways. So I was kind of curious too, if there's things that people can do if they're not in Texas. Are there like ways that you really kind of suggest for somebody out of state to help support on this right now?
Yeah, lots of ways to help out. And thank you, by the way, for spreading the word on what we're doing Empowered by People and connecting people to this work. So I mentioned that we're doing in-person voter registration, encouraging people and actually helping to train people to become volunteer deputy registrars, and then to learn our system of adding those people into relational networks so that we can stay in touch with them. But if you don't live in Texas and you aren't able to become a volunteer deputy registrar, there's some of this work that you can do at a distance. And so, for example, we are working with folks who are through the mail getting in touch with likely Democrats who are eligible but are unregistered. They'll get something in the mail that is a pre-filled voter registration form. It's got all their information. And if it's correct, they can sign it. They can send it in a self-addressed stamped envelope that's been included. But not everyone is going to open that envelope. Not everyone's going to trust it. And so our volunteers, including those who live out of state, can text or call the recipients of those voter registration forms. And they can say, hey, Tiffany, you got something from us last week. It may look like it's junk mail. You may not have opened it. You may have even thrown it away, but it's really important. It gives you the chance to register to vote. And if you have thrown it away, I can help you over the phone start the process of getting registered, and someone else on our team will finish that. And then again, importantly, we will want to stay in touch with you over the next 6 months to make sure that, because you've never voted in Texas before, you understand the rules, you know where your polling location is, the hours, what you have to bring to prove your identification, and that it is a successful ballot cast. That is the goal. I mean, it's wonderful to register people, but if those people don't vote, it's like a tree falling in the forest with no one there to hear it. We got to make sure that we see this thing through. So the best way for people to sign up is just to go to our website. It's poweredxpeople.org. They can sign up there either in Texas or outside of Texas. And of course, they can always donate. We have a very small team right now. We have 3 employees. We'll probably be growing it in the near future to bring on organizers who can manage all the volunteers that we have to make sure that we're doing this work and doing it effectively, and measuring it so that we can continue to improve upon it. But lots of opportunities for people to join. Thanks for spreading the word and getting it out there.
Thank you.
Diane Roberts has a question.
Hi, Beto. One of the concerns I have is that it seems even when we vote for local people, and I'm going to use Harris County as an example, and what Paxton's trying to do with the Uplift Harris program that would provide stipends basically for poor people of $500. You know, how do we convince people, or how do we get people out to vote? Because we all do a lot of voter registration. We elect people who are local, who meet our interests. And then you've got a state attorney general who wants to incorrectly use the language of the civil rights legislation to strike down something that could benefit poor people. So, you know, how do we help people understand the challenge that we're up against and how to fight that?
You know, this is one of those things that honestly can cause you to give into the temptation to despair. When you look at all the good that Democrats are doing, and you mentioned what Lena Hidalgo's doing in Harris County, what Judge Jenkins is doing in Dallas County, you know, Andy Brown and Travis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they're literally getting things done for people, and they could care less whether the people are Republicans or Democrats or independents or registered to vote or not registered to vote. They really are proving themselves in the competence of their leadership. And you look at Ken Paxton, who you mentioned, who is twice indicted, is under active FBI investigation, just tacitly admitted guilt in the securities fraud case, which I'd really like to understand how that thing got to a plea deal. But this guy is as corrupt as they come, openly, who is part of the incitement to violence on the 6th of January, 2021 at the Stop the Steal rally with Donald Trump. And that guy is going to be the moral arbiter of whether those who are in need should receive support and assistance to get back on their feet and to be more productive members of their society. It's crazy. But you know what? They're so good at this, Paxton and company, at reducing things to the level of fear or anxiety or outrage. How could you be giving my money away, my hard-earned dollars that I paid in taxes, to these people who are, you know, undeserving, I guess is the argument he's making, and then trying to imply that this is political corruption, that the commissioner's court in Harris County is trying to, I guess, purchase the votes of those. It's kind of like the argument they make about immigration, that, you know, we all want open borders, which of course we don't, but that we want open borders because we want to let in all of these illegal aliens who will now vote for Democrats. And on its face, it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because you cannot vote if you're here undocumented. It takes years if you're ever going to get your citizenship to be able to get there. So how do we win against that? I think we have to, one, stay in the fight and not give in. That's really important. And as obvious as that sounds, it's not always easy. Two, we've got to be so much stronger in making our case. President Biden, for example, the billions of dollars that are pouring into Texas because of his leadership in the White House for broadband internet, for water, wastewater, and sewage systems, for roads and bridges. The fact that he's helped to cut childhood poverty in Texas almost by half just in his administration through dollars that are again flowing into Texas. The single greatest effort to confront climate change ever by any president by a million miles. All of that on his watch. How many people know that? How many of those young people that I'm meeting at UTEP know that he's just been able to help forgive, millions of dollars in student loans, hundreds of millions of dollars ultimately in student loans that are going to benefit them? We do a crappy job, unfortunately, of telling our story and running on the amazing work that we're doing. You know why? Because we're interested in governing. We're interested in getting the job done. We believe in the truth. We're kind of like constrained by these parameters. The other side could care less about keeping the grid on and preventing people from freezing to death in their homes, could spend $10 billion on Operation Lone Star and see illegal immigration and trafficking in the places where they're concentrating the greatest amount of money and forces only increase over their time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, making the case, connecting the dots, being out there, meeting people where they are. That's what I'm doing at UTEP when I'm on the campus every day. I mean, yes, I'm asking people to register to vote, but I'm connecting what I'm doing to the things that they care about in their lives. And I think if we all continue to do that, that 16 points in 2012 that Obama lost by, the 9 and 16, the 5.5 by Biden, it just continues to come down. We are moving in the right direction. It is taking far longer than any of us want to, but one day we'll get there. You know that, right? You know that in your heart of hearts. You may think to yourself, well, maybe that'll happen in 20 years or 10 years or 6 years or 2 years. It's going to happen at some point. You want to still be alive and in this game when it does happen, to be able to enjoy a state that has finally gotten it right. And when it does, 40 electoral college votes say the day that a Democrat wins Texas is a day that a Republican can no longer win the White House. They would have to put 5 other states' electoral college votes together to equal what we have here. So it is really tough right now what Paxton and company are doing. We just have to stay the course, be more aggressive in this fight, and make sure that we are including in our message what we are accomplishing once we win these positions of power and public trust.
Yeah. Vita just typed her question into the thing. She said, having a voter ID is a lot like a poll tax. What are your recommendations for what to say to people, especially college students, about having an ID when student IDs are not acceptable?
Well, that again, Vita, thanks for the great question. And Vita is one of these amazing volunteers, along with Richard, who are out there doing the work right now. So she gets this. Yeah, that you can use your license to carry a firearm to prove who you are at the polling place, and you can't use your student ID from the University of Texas at El Paso to do the same. Says all you need to know about who is supposed to vote and who is not supposed to vote in Texas. Those young people, for as much as they're written off by those who are older than they are, as being lazy or whiny or whatever people say about young people today. I mean, there's a lot stacked up against them right now, including our voter laws in Texas. It's interesting. The first talk I gave in the book tour was in North Dakota. There's no voter registration at all in North Dakota. Just to give you an extreme example, and that is not a bright blue state, by the way. And then other states, as you know, don't have as strict a voter ID requirement. Will allow you to register on election day. Will automatically enroll you when you turn 18, or will allow you to register online. We do none of those things in the state of Texas, and it helps to explain why there are millions of eligible voters who are not participating. Not that they're lazy, not that they don't care about these issues. It's because we've made it way too hard. And so our job is to make it easier on them. And all of us are politically plugged in. We never miss an election. We're kind of the exception. And I think we have to be really generous and gracious in thinking about people for whom this may not have been part of growing up in their house. Their folks may not have voted. They may have a lot going on in their lives. And this may be a really scary proposition. You all saw that Crystal Mason was finally fully acquitted. She was sentenced to 5 years in prison for mistakenly voting when she was still on parole. Her mother had told her, "Hey, this is an important election. You can't miss it." And she said, "I don't know if I'm allowed to vote." Well, we'll go down, cast a provisional ballot, and if you're not allowed to vote, they won't count that vote. And they didn't count that vote because she was still on probation, 5 years in prison. And there's no accident that she's a Black woman, right? This was a message sent out to anyone else who's ever been involved in the criminal justice system: do not vote. So that's what we're up against right now, and that's why Nixon's story is so relevant. No, the legislature has not passed a law recently that says that Black people or young people or very old people or people with disabilities can't vote, but they've made it hard for all of these groups to participate in our elections and our politics. So we, like Nixon, or like Septima Clark, who did the citizenship schools throughout the Great South, or John Lewis, who marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, we've got to do our part. And if we do, I'm confident, just like they made it happen back then, we will make it happen right now. Not going to be easy, but we've got to give it all we can, and we've got to try, and we got to try together in Richardson. We got to try together here in El Paso. We got to try together all across the state of Texas.
I want you to meet Destiny. Destiny, say your last name.
Well, I don't want to say my last name because I read the book, but my last name is Herndon De La Rosa. And I found out that my horrible last name is part of a Supreme Court thing. I mean, against Nixon. I had no idea until I read the book that, and I immediately got on 23andMe and tried to figure out if I was related to that guy who tried to stop Nixon from voting, but that was horrifying. So anyway, my name is Destiny Herndon De La Rosa. And Jenny actually pushed me to read your book, and I didn't want to at first because I knew it was going to make me want to run for office. Like, I just knew it because the way you speak often does that. But I currently have 2 shelters along the border. My organization runs one in Ciudad Juarez and one in El Paso, Texas. And as I'm sure you're aware, you know, Abbott and Paxton are currently cracking down on any shelters in El Paso, especially Annunciation House, saying that we are aiding in human trafficking. And it's something that has become, I mean, we're having to have meetings about this all the time rather than actually serving the people that we're caring about, because it is a man-made crisis. Everything that's happening at the border right now is absolutely a man-made crisis, and Abbott is profiting off of it exponentially. But this is what's happening to me as an activist who used to be a bullhorn activist, but now I'm a direct action activist. It's become really difficult because I sit back and I watch and I'm seeing all this insanity, but also this is not okay to say, but I feel like I have activist blue balls a little bit. Like, I can't like go out and vocally talk about what's happening because it would put a target on my shelter in particular. But we're watching them just screw this up, make a ton of money off of the exploitation of people, right? Like, Abbott has his cronies that he is paying $1,200 for a bus ticket to Chicago. That should be a $300 bus ticket, but he's using companies, right, that his donors' children own, and all of this type of insane stuff. So I guess my question is there any plan, network, mole that you can give me that I can email them and let them know, like, boots on the ground, we're seeing this insane stuff, and I can't talk about it because I can't put that target on our particular shelter, but it has to get out there. Like, even fiscal conservatives would be horrified by the amount of money that is going towards this fake invasion that's not happening.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you for the work you're doing, and thank you for bringing this up. You and I and every other Texas taxpayer are on the hook for $10 billion and counting since Operation Lone Star began, the involuntary activation of 10,000 members of the Guard, sending all our state DPS troopers to the border instead of keeping them on our highways, where we're seeing some of the deadliest years on record for highway fatalities, in part because all of the DPS troopers are on the border. And what are they doing? They are confronting very often families, young mothers, small children who are doing what any of us would do faced with the same set of circumstances. If it were too dangerous to stay in your home country, if to stay meant to die or to lose the life of your child, you would do everything you could to get them to a better place. And for many of them, that's America. And just for context, really quickly, America is not the only place they're going. For example, 7 million people have fled the basket case that is Venezuela today. 7 million. I think Colombia, a country of like 50 million, 55 million maybe, has accepted 3 million of them. We've accepted something like 500,000, 600,000 Venezuelans. So, I mean, this is a hemispheric wide problem. And it happens at a time where we could really use those who are coming here. I mean, I want them to be okay. The moral imperative is enough to compel me to do the right thing. But in addition, those who come to this country come to a country where the unemployment rate is 3.9%. You have to go back to 1968 to find a parallel where the economy's been humming the way it is right now, where we have 9 million unfilled jobs. We have people who are coming here willing to work those jobs. All that it requires is the political will to make sure that we vet them, to ensure that they're not a danger to us or anybody who lives in this country, to confirm their asylum request and their basis in asylum, to give them work authorization, and to allow them to continue to contribute to the greatness of America. In addition, obviously, we need comprehensive immigration reform. We need many other legal pathways for people to come here and to do it the right way. But we've absolutely lost our mind. And you know full well that our great grandkids will be reading the history books of 2024, and they'll just ask themselves, what in the world were these people thinking? How could you put up razor wire, floating buoy barriers, shut down a 46-year-old shelter system, Annunciation House that you mentioned here in El Paso, which is what Ken Paxton is trying to do, and this big boogeyman, this threat that you were facing, were these asylum seekers and refugees from around the world who wanted to find a home in America, which is a country comprised of asylum seekers and refugees from around the world in the first place. The only way we became the greatest country in the world, the lone superpower today, is by the contribution of people from all over the planet. It's what's going to sustain that going forward. If you don't care about their lives, if you only want to look at our selfish interest as a country, we should be finding a way to welcome these people in. And to your point, we're spending an arm and a leg. $10 billion in Texas. Biden, in his latest budget that was just adopted for DHS, has doubled the spending on the Border Patrol just since he has been in office. It is 5 times more than we were spending 20 years ago. And I don't need to ask you all, but has that worked? Enforcement, deterrence, detention alone is not going to get the job done. Legal pathways, screening people who come into this country, making sure that they have a safe place and then can work and produce for the rest of us, that's the way forward. So that's one of these messages I wish our own party was sharing, and I'd love to, respectfully and constructively push the president to do the right thing on this issue, because he has a lot of power right now to do that. And the other thing is, Republicans are kicking our ass up and down the street on this issue, because instead of standing up for our values and saying this is what we believe in, we're basically parroting a lighter weight version of what they're saying. And I think we got to get back to our core values and principles on this, and remind everyone that security and safety is inextricably connected to good policy, legal pathways for people to come here and do this the right way. Anyhow, thanks for what you're doing with the shelter in Ciudad Juarez and in El Paso, and for highlighting what's going on with Annunciation House, which is under attack by Ken Paxton right now. And this is an issue that I think is going to decide the presidential election. It's an issue that was so hard for us in Texas in the 2022 race, in part because we didn't have other national Democrats saying this, but it's one where we can get better on, and you're one of those who's going to have to lead on this. Doing so responsibly, where you don't put a target on your organization, but helping those of us on calls like this do the right thing. So thank you for doing this, Destiny.
Yeah, you need to meet Destiny when she comes to town sometime.
Absolutely, I'm in.
I'd love for you guys to meet. I am hearing that you need to jump, so I'm going to send you questions. How about that? I'll send you questions,
please,
and then you can then answer someone on email or something to me, and I'll get them out to people. Thank you so much for writing this book for showing us what it looks like to keep trying. You always inspire us. I mean, because like you started off with, it is so hard sometimes to keep the fight. But when you when you're doing what you're doing and you're telling us like you're telling us, how can we not? So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for your time tonight, for being so generous with us. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Jenny. And thanks to everyone who's on the call. I really enjoyed it. And I'm so grateful that you all read the book. So appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you out there in person soon. We'll be traveling to North Texas before long. So we'll see you out there.
All
Adios.
right.